Hi everybody, I'm Daria and I'm an exchange student in America. I want to present my project, which will have several interviews of American students who will tell about media and how it affects their political perception. I chose students who study only political science in order to get accurate answers. And this topic is pretty relevant nowadays due to fast social media development, when internet becomes one of the main media resources and provides the content for all generations. And I'm really curious how political processes, pre-election campaigns, and elections depends on political agenda in media. So let's get started. Hi Turner, so before my questions, can you introduce yourself please and tell us why you decided to study political science?
Well, my name is Turner Boudreau. I'm a sophomore. I'm studying political science because I'm really interested in it. I'm also a history major as well, so I try to put the two together to try to flesh out my degree. It's two subjects I'm really interested in, so I just went down that path.
Wow. Okay, what is your favorite media source and where do you usually get news?
It depends. I don't think it's healthy just to have one to rely on one media source. So I try to diversify how many opinions I get on a subject. But some of the news sources I use, AP is really good. Um, was it the PBS Public Broadcasting? I don't know, something like that. And then some of the partisan news networks, they get a lot of crap, but you just try to get every opinion. CNN, Fox. I may not agree with everything, but it's important to find, what both sides are saying, and then try to find something in the middle overlap. And then got to shout out my guy on YouTube, Secular Talk, Kyle Kalinske on YouTube. Great coverage on everything. He predicted a lot of what would happen in the 2020 election in America.
Mm-hmm.
So he's pretty good, but obviously he has a partisan bias or whatever. But
Yeah. Okay, so I think you're familiar with traditional and modern media. So how do you think, where is more reliable information for you? Is it TV or internet? And do you consider TV as a traditional and old media already?
So definitely TV is traditional media, but of course they've tried to branch out. CNN tried doing CNN Plus, which failed miserably within the first 3 months. So trying to branch into that field for them, for a traditional news source to kind of the new age media. We haven't seen a whole lot of breakthroughs in that. And I guess it's just the evolution of how media is distributed. Obviously, traditional media has its pros and cons. You could say that they hire a lot of people who are experts on the subject, or have a lot of clout in the game, but at the same time that leads to elitism. And we also have seen a huge kind of, what's the word I'm thinking of, I guess exploitation of interest groups getting into news media and stuff. So a lot of pros that new media has is that they're kind of not locked down with any sort of interest group or any sort of.
But you still consume some news from TV? How often do you usually watch TV?
Not very often. It's not my main source.
Me too. So I want to ask you about media's influence right now, and let's talk about elections. Did you vote?
I did vote. I did.
Was it your first time?
It was my first time, yeah.
So what do you think about media power based on last elections? Was it more intense propaganda than in the past, or it was normal and same?
I would say that it was very interesting circumstances that went on during that election. We had the right-wing populist, so-called populist, Donald J. Trump running against Joe Biden, and I didn't like either of them, but it seemed like a dire situation to get him out of office. And I'm not saying that we got anyone better, but I'm saying he was a lot less destructive. So it's the reason why I voted for Joe Biden, was because it was my first election. Might as well just get that out of the way, vote for the first time. Then at the same time, it was like, well, he's not as bad. He's still a neoliberal hack, but what can you do?
Do you remember, could you change your mind of your vote of president elections during pre-election campaign? Like, could campaign change your mind? Or you already knew beforehand, so your vote will be?
It really depends. I mean, you got to look at a lot of things before you vote. Public opinion is one thing. What they promise on the campaign trail that not doesn't always translate to what they'll do in office. We see that plenty of times where they make all these promises, but they never follow through. Also, policy history with a lot of politicians. If they've been in office before, you can look back at what they've done prior, and kind of that's what guides what would be their current term.
Turner, do you usually believe in information from American news about other countries?
I mean, depends on the news source again, and it depends if they have a bias or not. It depends on what angle they're recording from or reporting from. Usually, you got to look in, especially with international sources, you have to look in at a lot of other standpoints and viewpoints, because I would imagine if a news company from America is covering another country, there might be a slight bias with it.
I think it will be hard to check like China because you will not get Chinese, but do you usually check like Germany or United Kingdom? Just be honest. You check?
I do. Well, when I was getting into politics, I was BBC is not always the best source, but they do offer a different standpoint from American news. It depends on you to not just be sitting there consuming whatever is coming in your face. You have to actually sit there. Maybe I'm just a nerd. Maybe I'm just a political science nerd, but that's how I spend my free time, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay. How do you think, why are most of Americans so isolated from the world news and follow news of only domestic politics?
I guess interest. I would imagine these news companies see that their views, unless it's something completely scandalous or crazy, you know what I mean? Viewers just don't check in. Not everyone is a political junkie. Not everyone is going to be interested in diving headfirst into these complex geopolitical issues. I don't know. Maybe it's a lack of interest. Maybe it's a lack of care. Maybe we're so isolated in our little American bubble that we don't always try to tune in to see what the rest of the world is up to, because we're,
How do you think, what is the reason of this bubble, that America is super far due to geography, or it's because it's like super safe and America's strongest economy, military, and they just don't care?
Okay, it's probably a mix of a lot of things. I would say isolation is one thing. We're just not connected to Europe by land. It takes a little bit to get over there, but at the same time, we live a little bit. My
flight is 3 days back to home.
Little bit, yeah. So, distance is one thing, but I would also say that just, I guess, interest. What happens over there doesn't affect us because we're, like you said, like 3 days away travel. So it really depends. But at the same time too, we still do stuff internationally, but the American people might not really care about it, or we're persuaded to think one thing about it, and we don't see, what I was thinking about was the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. That was an international issue. We were condemned by the United Nations, but at the same time, we still did it, and a lot of Americans supported it because we couldn't see it firsthand, or we couldn't even see it secondhand. A lot of those sources were, there's a lot of reports coming out that said, if you do negative coverage against the war, this might not have been a government policy, it probably was, but even if it was, there were still a lot of news companies who were like, well, we got to give it positive press because we need to maintain our positive image. We can't go against the status quo or what we're doing in this time. So
so you mentioned Afghanistan and Iraq wars, and I wanted to ask you, do you remember some events in the US history when media presented some event in a wrong way and you knew that 100% that is lie?
I'm trying to think, because those wars have been going on for a very long time. I'm in a very weird position, I'm sure you are too, where I was born after the war started, and then it ended when I turned 18, 19, so I've been encapsulated by it. And the one thing I remember was the Afghanistan papers that came out maybe a few years ago and now at this point, which was weird because not a lot of people showed interest in it, but I thought they were pretty damning. They released these papers about, just horrible things happening there, general just disorganization with the entire affair. There wasn't a clear mission statement, but no one really seemed to care except for the weirdest of political junkies like me and
Mhm.
other people in my circle. So
Mhm.
I don't know. That
Okay.
struck me as odd.
So yeah, speaking about your circle, so do you have same views as your family, and do you share media sources with each other?
Yeah, for the most part, I was pretty grateful to have parents that agree with me on a lot of things. I was raised in a very liberal household.
Wow.
Now, I know it's weird, but at the same time,
Which state you from?
I'm military family, so like,
Wow.
which is even more weird because you would think they're like traditional conservative military type, but
Mhm.
they're really not. My parents are cool, but you know, I try to share sources with them that I like. I think I go further left than they do, for the most part.
Mhm.
But just to have that base with them agreeing with me on most issues, like it's not a fight every time we have political conversation at the dinner table, which is
Mhm.
pretty nice.
Oh wow, yeah. Okay, so what do you think about YouTube today? Is it still an independent and free media, or it's already under someone's control?
It really depends because YouTube has started censoring and suppressing a lot of outsider voices and information. And it really started with them silencing and banning Alex Jones. Now, I don't like Alex Jones. I'm sure a lot of people can say that, but at the same time, I feel like that opened up a Pandora's box of other sources getting suppressed on the left. Again, I have to mention my boy Kyle Kalinske. He kind of just hit a ceiling. The amount of subscribers he was gaining, people were noticing that. He was noticing that, and then all of a sudden his videos just stopped getting recommended to people. So if you were watching, his videos and you just had like autoplay on, or even if you weren't watching his videos, you would just get recommended establishment sources like CNN or MSNBC instead of his videos. And a lot of other people have suffered that same fate.
And what about other social media like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter? Are there do you find them trustworthy sources where people can see the truth if they will search?
I would say generally no, especially Facebook. I think Facebook is not the greatest source of news you could ever get. Instagram, you really have to search. But even then, I would say probably not. Twitter, probably not. And
what was your reaction when Elon Musk bought Twitter?
I mean, it seems like his just little passion project. It seems like he just bought it just for the clout. And we'll see what he does with it. He was promising a renewal of freedom of speech on Twitter. He was promising all this and that. But at the same time, it's in private hands. He can do whatever he wants with it. He doesn't have to maintain his promise because he's running it as a business. I would have personally wanted to see Twitter managed like a public utility because it is the new public market. It is the new marketplace of ideas. So if it was regulated in that way, that would have been great. Preferably not by Elon Musk or another private owner, but again, we'll see what he does with it.
So next question, when Americans complain about two-party system, I always like it's better than one. So I personally never realized how it can be a huge problem. So how do you think, what do people want when they say that current system is better, not efficient enough?
Well, with a two-party system, what you get is political deadlock. So a lot of things just can't move through because it's this way or that way, and we don't see a lot of compromise anymore with what is passed, and what is compromised is usually watered down to the point where it's completely minute and it's not going to change anything. So from my understanding, with a multi-party system instead of a bi-party system, you would have something like a parliamentary system and a lot of other parliamentary republics where you would have seats based on the parties who are voted in, which means there's a lot more coalition building, and it means there's a lot less deadlock because you really have to navigate and pursue policy that appeals to more and unique standards and viewpoints. So it really depends. Obviously, the system now we see isn't working. It's just what we need to fix it, and that's what a lot of people disagree on. So,
do you think it's a problem when you vote to the third party and your vote goes nowhere, like you waste your vote? This theory.
Yeah, and I was even thinking about voting third party. because the two parties, they don't offer anything. They usually don't offer anything that I really like, nor do I think they're going to get anything done. So a third party vote is kind of like an FU to that kind of system. And I get it. It kind of is throwing your vote away, but if enough people vote third party, that's how we see interesting things happen in the political world that I think would be beneficial to break the deadlock we're currently in. It's just gathering enough people to do it is the tricky part. But it all depends.
Yeah, okay. I know that this question will not be relevant for political people, but since you studied political science, let me ask you this. Do you try to surround yourself people with the same political views as yours, or it doesn't matter for you?
So it really depends. A lot of my close friends agree with me with a lot of my political positions, but those are people in like, I just like them as people, you know what I mean? And it just so happens we agree politically, and we probably are better friends because of that. But, you know, generally, I try to listen to everyone with what everyone says, and if they have some whack political beliefs, you know, you got to call them out for that. But at the same time, you're going to have your beliefs, I'm going to have mine. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, it just happens probably accidentally when you just like your close friends, you just have like same views.
Yeah.
I think it's natural. Same questions about celebrities and artists and musicians. What if your favorite musician will say something against your views, your values, and you like super against it? Would you stop listening to his songs, or would you stop like to follow some artist and his works?
So that kind of did happen. An artist known as Ariel Pink went to the January 6th riots on Capitol Hill, and that really stunk because I really like their music, but at the same time, I think it's a very personal decision. I don't think I could say it's right or wrong to follow or not follow an artist because of their political beliefs. I think it's completely up to you. And like, if you still like Ariel Pink's music, go ahead, you know, it was good stuff, but I don't know, it just kind of turned me off from listening to it. But there are some other artists who have some pretty wacky beliefs that I still quite enjoy, that being Kanye West. He's crazy, but Life of Pablo's good.
Yeah, so usually I try to separate celebrities and their works.
I mean, they're going to have their own opinions. They're free people. You know what I mean? They're going to say what they say and believe what they want to believe. But I think it's up to you if you want to follow them or not. It's completely a personal preference, I suppose.
And the last question, bonus question for you. I never ask it. Can you name some mistakes in American political agenda nowadays? Why do societies split up nowadays, if you think it's split up?
Why do people like split up and atomize along political lines, or?
Yeah, like in political views, it's like so like radical left and radical right.
Okay.
And what is the mistake of American political agenda nowadays?
So I would probably say that people are atomizing and falling into more radical beliefs because the current system isn't working. We see it time and time again. We just get embroiled in the same wars, the same recessions. We get embroiled in the same conflicts that we could have solved many times ago, but we chose not to because what we're following is what makes the most money. And this kind of started with Ronald Reagan. So we follow these same lines and people get dissuaded and disillusioned and they look for other things to kind of change that. And I feel like there's a lot of valid decisions and a lot of valid, you know, things people do, but at the same time, when you atomize, you get more rowdy, a bit more violent. But I mean, what's the current system offering to fix it? Not a whole lot. So who knows? I can't really predict what's going to happen, but at the same time, I'm kind of interested to see what will happen.
Okay, thank you so much.